Hi, I'm Matt Williams. Welcome to Glimpses. My guest today is a gifted and passionate advocate of the arts. She is the artistic director and CEO of Harlem Stage, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. Pat Cruz, welcome to Glimpses.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
40 years.
Yeah. Not that I've been there 40 years, but 40 years in existence. I came in 1998,
Okay,
picking up the reins from incredible artists and arts administrators who ran Aaron Davis Hall
right.
prior to my joining.
But you joined, and I found this on the internet. It says Cruz helped to raise $26 million.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money to renovate the Gatehouse
Yes.
and turn it into the home for Harlem Stage. So tell us about that. Tell
Th-
us, for people who don't know Harlem Stage, what is the history? What's the mission? What do you do?
Harlem Stage was an offshoot or developed as a result of the work that we did at Aaron Davis Hall.
Okay.
That was on the campus of City College, but not a part of it. Because really, the college, as many colleges could not do, was be able to afford a performing arts venue. So what happened was there was an entity called the Friends of Aaron Davis Hall that raised money for that. And I have predecessors like Brad Lehrman and others who were actually a part of the founding of that and had a critical mission of lifting up the creative voices of artists of color who had been denied and not really offered the kind of opportunities that their visions, that their talents deserved. So they were doing that work prior to my coming. I had been at the Studio Museum
Hmm.
at that point
Yeah.
in my career, and they recruited me to come and head up this organization. And I was more than willing to do it. And ironically, Matt, I actually performed there because my first career, or one of my many careers, was as a performing artist.
Right.
So I performed there doing a work of my husband's, Emilio Cruz. And that was my kind of beginning introduction to the work at Aaron Davis Hall. I had known of it, of course, over the years because so many wonderful things had happened there, but to have been able to perform there and understand what the mission was and then move on to be recruited to head up the organization was just a perfect irony and perfect serendipity. It was all as if it should have been, and I was happy for it.
Well, that's wonderful. So tell us. I pulled this quote. Our mission has been to perpetuate and celebrate the unique and diverse artistic legacy of Harlem and the indelible impression it has made on American culture. That's great. And I, as I was reading and refreshing my memory about
Yeah.
Harlem Stage, I kept thinking, you present opportunities to those with few opportunities.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about the programming because I knew about Harlem Stage, obviously. I live in New
Yeah.
York, but you've got quite a few programs going on.
We do.
Yeah.
And we're trying to kind of put those programs in categories that could be understood. So we address all of the performing arts, and that is dance, music, primarily, some theater, and film. We have a full and very robust education program as well. And all of that education program really does reflect the regular programming that we're doing. Now, what we've always done, and I think it's very important to acknowledge it, when we talk about lifting up the work of artists of color, it really is supporting their work through finances to be able to provide commissioning funds for the development of work. It's very different to say to an artist, come on in, you've got a project that we want to show, and we will present that work. We do that as well. But our primary activity, I think, that we've had the greatest impact in is really commissioning the work of artists like Vijay Iyer, like Jason Moran, like Stu, artists like Sekou Sundiata before I came, but artists Craig Harris, all of the artists that we have commissioned, and there are many more than that, and I'm just naming several of them. But that is a commitment that goes from 2 to 3 years in the develop.
2 to 3 years.
Absolutely.
That's a long commitment.
It is. And it really depends on what the artist's vision is and how long it takes to develop that. So that then once that happens and they've developed a work of art that they feel is ready to be premiered or shown at Harlem Stage, then it can go on to other parts of the world, other venues around the city, but mostly to see this work to be able to be presented for audiences around the world to be able to see, but across the country. And that is our primary program. And once we moved into the Harlem Stage Gatehouse, that's when we called it Waterworks.
Oh,
So it became the Waterworks commissioning program. And we commission both established artists, like some of the ones I've named, and lesser known artists who come to us at the beginning of their career and then go on to establish their works. And I'm so proud of people like Camille A. Brown, who we gave some of the first work to through our Fund for New Work program, and then subsequently are working with her. And we are going to present her during this 40th anniversary because our 40th anniversary is really an opportunity to revisit with these artists where they have been, what they have done, and to look to them to identify younger artists who can be brought in to visibility, into recognition, so that their visions can also be recognized. And that's one of the joys of doing this work.
it's
So,
vital to find young, fresh talent and then to
yeah,
have those who've broken ground and are established helping them
yeah.
in that process.
Yeah,
That's great.
two of the first artists we had in the Waterworks program, one was Bill T. Jones,
Of-
who needed no introduction but had worked with us in the past. And he developed a piece called Chapter Chapel. And it was a piece that went on to tour the country and then toured internationally as well. And it was one of my proudest moments. And I think one of the most unique pieces that Bill built, because it was in the round and it was theatrical in nature, with both spoken word and incredible dance vocabulary that was deployed. We also, at that time, introduced the work of Tanya Leon, an incredible Cuban American composer and conductor who actually started her career in America working with Arthur Mitchell in the Dance Theater of Harlem.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
so to have her come in and to give her one of the first commissions, as well as with Roger Denver Smith. So we honored Tanya last year at our gala, and we're bringing Bill back to revisit a work that he did previously, as with many of the artists that are coming back. Vijay Iyer is doing a tribute to Andrew Hill, who was one of the first pianists to perform in one of the works that I created when I came, which was called Pianos for Duke. And
Oh,
that program had 5 different pianists play tributes to Andrew to Duke Ellington.
right.
Andrew was one of them, and ironically, Jason Moran was one of them. And Jason Moran is coming back during the 40th. He is the only living pianist of those that we presented in the original Pianos for Duke as the first work that I did, and that was in '99.
Wow.
So we're
Okay.
bringing it back, and he's bringing back Abdul Ibrahim, otherwise previously known as Dollar Brand, the great pianist, who at 85 is making a rare appearance and in New York as a part of this 40th and under Jason's curatorial practice, and he will be performing as well with him. It's incredible.
That's wonderful. I'm gonna give you a real plug here. I'm gonna hold up for anyone that's watching this your program for the
Okay.
40th anniversary season, and it is a season. It's not
Yes.
like one night of celebrating 40 years.
Yeah.
This is over the entire year.
Exactly.
You have programs throughout
They're
the year,
ending in June. From now, we're in it. We
right?
opened actually in a collaborative project that we did at Bryant Park with Jose James, who was also one of the earliest artists that we presented at Harlem Stage. So he opened to over 4,000 people visiting Bryant Park to hear his concert, which was our opening and their closing for their summer stage, their summer activity, their summer
Right.
picnic series. And that was remarkable. 4,000 people came, but another 15,000 viewed it through live stream.
That's great. That's great. We rail
Yeah.
against technology, but when 15,000 people can live stream, you go, okay, it's
And
a,
for me, that's heaven.
yeah,
And it's one of the things we know people are kind of backing away from streaming.
right,
Is it going to be live? Is it going to be captured? And we're trying to balance all of
right.
that because our space is very intimate. We have 100, perhaps 120 people in the audience on any given night, and that's our capacity. But to be able to live stream that program to a larger audience, I think actually expands our mission to get this work, or it helps to realize the mission of getting it broadly known,
Right.
because I think that's what's important.
Talk about your personal journey because you were born in Chicago. You
Yes.
studied as an actor and you
Yes.
were an activist. You mentioned your late husband, Emilio Cruz.
Yes.
You traveled the world together.
Yes, we did. We
I
did.
knew you did, and I knew about your husband, obviously.
Yeah.
But as I was reading, I went, Italy. I mean, you went all over the world as a performer.
Yeah.
And look how that has informed you now as the executive director. You can bring that perspective into Harlem Stage.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that it's true of a lot of our staff. They have been performers or they've been artists who are in the front of the stage, but because they are now bringing that experience into their administrative roles at Harlem Stage, I find that there is a greater rapport between understanding what the artist needs because it's a very vulnerable process, as you know, Matt, to be in front of an audience and reveal what you are thinking in a way that is not traditional. The work that we do is experimental by nature. Some would call it avant garde, some would call it cutting edge. I try to stay away from those labels, but what we know is that these artists are bringing a vision, and it's up to them to see how they realize that. And it's up to us to support revealing that vision and bringing it to its fullest capacity for these artists. And it's been a remarkable journey and we've loved it. And the work that I was doing with Emilio was very much experimental, devised. So I think we had a very firm ground for supporting the work that we've supported.
Well, Pat, about every 10 years or so, there's articles and essays saying theater's dead, you
Yeah.
know, I had to laugh. I thought, well, it seems theater in America is always dying. And I thought, well, if theater is always dying, then Harlem Stage is performing CPR, right? Because that's what you're doing. You're pumping new life into these pieces that may not be as perceived as quote commercial as others.
Right,
Like you said, it's the vision of the
right,
artist that you're nurturing. It's
right.
not just let's find a piece that we can make some money and tour the country with.
Absolutely.
It's the antithesis of that, which is let's experiment. Let's find
Right.
that vision, that unique vision, and support it.
Let's share ideas.
Share
Because
ideas.
that's what art making has always been about. It's like reading a book that you did not understand the purpose of the book when you went into it, but somehow you found yourself there.
Yes.
And I think that that's what's true when we see a work of art that's a performance. Certainly, Stu has been a masterful contributor to our work, and in terms of his storytelling, as well as the music that he puts behind it. And all of these artists, I would say, are addressing our current condition, the
Mhm.
social conditions that shape our lives. So it's hard for us not to be social activists or justice change agents, revealing how people are feeling, how they are affected by the current circumstances, whether it's political or social or economic. So we're really looking at artists who are, I think, visionaries. So it doesn't matter if they're playing the piano or dancing
Right.
or speaking, but what they're doing is communicating. And for me, what that does is allows you to see the world through the eyes of a creative being, and you're sharing in the creation as you're doing it.
I think that is so vital. And I always say stories connect us.
Yeah,
And we may come from different backgrounds, different cultures, but when we share a story, we
yeah,
share our humanity.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I connect with you and you connect with me in a way that we didn't think was possible.
Absolutely.
And
And
that
it's
that
needed now more than ever.
oh, it does because it
Yeah.
awakens something in you
Yeah.
that has always been in there. And we can call it compassion, we can call it love, we can call it, but it's just making people aware.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Uh, Throughout history, the theater is there's always been some element of the sacred in
Yes.
theater,
Yes.
from Egyptian dramas to shamanic rituals to the Greeks building their theaters near temples.
Yes.
Do you consider the Gatehouse and Harlem Stage a sacred space?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's our cathedral of art. One of the things is the Gatehouse was built in the 1890s at a time when New Yorkers were dying of waterborne diseases. The Gatehouse was one of those conduits for clean water from the Croton Aqueduct, supplying what was one of the reservoirs that was in Bryant Park,
Huh?
as well as Central Park, with clean water. We have indicated in the restoration of the Gatehouse that this is the place from which art and ideas now flow to feed humanity. And I think that a part of that mission is a spiritual mission. And I think that certainly when the artists come into the space, they're like, ugh, I can create here because it
Right.
is a kind of and when Bill called it chapel chapter, there was a cathedral element to that and a kind of litany that took place that surrounded the dance with the music. And I think that's what has happened so frequently as we've done. We did a whole series celebrating James Baldwin's work. We like to reflect what has been created in Harlem and from Harlem. That was the Duke Ellington piece, the James
Right.
Baldwin piece. We had Michelle Indigocello creating a huge work that happened to have been on the night of the presidential election when we found that the previous president had been elected. And we felt, I think, more than ever, the need to have a communion with people who saw the world in a more complete way, in a way that lifts us all up. And that was one of the many works that we did with James Baldwin. Certainly, Stu did a work that then became a record for that, a CD that he did. And that was called Notes of a Native Song. And that's the work that he took on. So, again, I think that the minute artists walk into that space, they feel that it is sacred, and we attempt to maintain that in our relationship with both the artist and the audiences.
I think that's magnificent because I truly believe in life, everything is basically a spiritual experience.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
if I go right now, we're having a spiritual experience.
yeah,
My spirit is mingling with yours.
yeah,
When you get a collection of spirits sitting in a theater and the performers are up there performing and you're
yeah,
sharing the same space, all that spirit energy becomes bigger
yeah,
and you feel a part of something bigger than yourself.
absolutely.
And I think there's a deep longing on some atavistic level to
Yeah,
be a part of that thing, whatever that thing is, that
yeah,
is bigger than all of us,
yeah.
you
I,
know?
I definitely believe in that form of communal experience and the creation of awe. And I think awe does allow you to acknowledge that there is a spirit greater than the one that you are carrying and that you are a part of. And to be linked in that way is spiritual as well as physical. And I think it addresses that issue of loneliness and alienation that we're so frequently talking about now, the frustration of people being in isolation one from another. So I do think it serves that purpose. And there is a healing that comes from that form of communion because you do feel, well, I'm not alone in this,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and it gives you a methodology for coping, you know, a reason to move on, a reason to connect, and to stay as much as one can in that state of awe.
The creation of all. I love that phrase. The creation of all. That's magnificent. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's what I believe, you know, so
Yeah.
it's easy to say it.
Yeah. That sense of awe. And what happens when we have that sense of awe, like a child or
Yes.
a beautiful experience,
Yeah.
is it does open us up. So the spirit does expand,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
it expands
Absolutely.
and mingles. So,
And allows one to embrace others and other ideas.
uh-huh.
That's why I've been such a fan of art, all of it, whether it's performing or visual arts. My husband was a wonderful painter and
Right.
artist, so I was able to get some incredible training from him. He was a teacher for me, as he was for many others. So it's been a life in learning.
So did this artistic spark come about when you were a child? Was your family in the arts? When did you awaken that desire to perform or to connect or create awe?
My
You know?
mother was a bit of a stage mother.
Okay.
And
All
she
right.
pushed me out as much as she possibly could. First in church pageants,
Okay.
which I was completely reluctant to do. And then,
And by a church pageant, are you performing in the pageant or are you just standing up there being pretty?
I think I'm performing even, yeah, you know, saying a few words that were assigned to me,
Okay.
but very reluctantly, trust me. My
Okay.
mother was kind of pushing me forward. And I appreciate that because she was very spirited, very much a role model for me in terms of being adventurous. And I don't know that my mother ever knew fear, which is a remarkable thing. She just would see an obstacle and try to figure out how to get around it.
Mm.
And how do you overcome that obstacle? So it is something that has been very influential for me. And I think that that's true of my entire family. I just went to celebrate my brother's 90th birthday
Wonderful.
in
Wonderful.
Florida on a boat, and we were all there celebrating one another. And I think one of the things that's a true blessing is to have a family, a husband, a relationship that allows you to be fearless and move into the world and create things that you think will others will benefit from and to share with. So it's been a kind of mission that I've fallen into,
Right.
Matt, without having to have that directed to me. I've
Right.
been lucky enough to just do it.
So, Pat, if anyone wants to learn more about Harlem Stage, they can go to your webpage,
Absolutely.
which is harlemstage.org.
.org.
Dot
Yeah.
org.
Yeah.
And that's got all the programs and the
Absolutely.
calendar for the year.
Exactly. And they can start now and continue through June.
Okay.
Camille's going to wrap us up. Camille A. Brown is going to wrap us up at the end of June. We've got Craig Harris coming in this month. In fact, we begin with Ron K. Brown and Evidence, and that will be this coming weekend. I'm not sure when the podcast is broadcast, but that will be one of the first things that we do this weekend, the 13th and the 14th.
But what's wonderful is theater is alive when so much is going on. When you
Yes.
have that many programs and that
Yeah.
many people coming in, it keeps the spirit
Yeah.
of the theater alive.
Absolutely.
So we've got 40 years. What's the future for the next 40 years?
I would say to go deeper, to be able to expand the number of artists that we can commission, to be able to really give them all of the resources that they need to develop this work, and to expand audiences for the work. So that is through the live streaming that we're going to be experimenting with. In fact, we're going to live stream Craig Harris's work that's coming up on the 20th because it's a test. It gives us an opportunity to see whether streaming can be alive and well, and when audiences most want to come into that process. Our ticket prices remain very reasonable. The intimacy, when audiences come to see the artist, they're seeing them practically as close as the two of us
Yeah.
are now. And that makes a huge difference because this is not a big stadium. It's not a big audience where you're having to use binoculars
Yeah.
to see who's saying what and how they're doing it. You're right there in the space. And
It is
that's
a
what's-
wonderful space. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful space.
Yeah, it's very special.
Yeah.
And everyone has responded to that. But I do think that we want as many people to come in to this space as possible. This opportunity that that Jason has curated with Pianos for Duke Revisited, and the opportunity to see Abdullah Ibrahim, as well as Matthew Whitaker is the youngest pianist, and we honored him some years ago with Joanne Brackeen, as well as Bertha Hope, pianists who have been on the scene for a while, but not necessarily recognized for their full contributions, and that's what we do. So there's something for everyone, whether you're a dance artist, spoken word, film. We just had an incredible showing of The Burial, and our board is really active in this regard, and I want to acknowledge them.
Good.
Jeanette Kahn was a producer for a new film that's just being released through Amazon, and it's called The Burial, and we had an intimate film screening of that just a couple of days ago, and it was remarkable. So to have both a board and a staff that is creative, understands what it means to make art. Tamara Tooney was our fearless leader for many years
Yes.
as our president.
One of the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Courtney Mitchell, who's just done, and it just also did Kindred, that was shown on streaming services. So again, we have a creative board that understands the significance, and my staff is the same way. So I have a team, and
That's
I
great.
think it's spectacular and very unique.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, this podcast is entitled Glimpses, and it's comes from the book that is coming out in February called Glimpses, a comedy writer's take on life, love, and all that spiritual stuff.
Okay.
And the Glimpses is about seeing little glimpses of God in your daily life.
Ah,
And by that, I mean moments of grace, kindness,
Yes.
compassion.
yes.
And part of the real drive behind the book is to encourage people to look around and catch little glimpses
Yes.
that's out there. And as
Yeah.
you go about your daily life, knocking around New York City, do you
Yeah.
see glimpses?
Every single second. I don't wake up without a glimpse of understanding my relationship to the spiritual, to the godly, understanding its relationship to us as individuals, as well as to those that we love. And I think that opening the door to that embrace is something that as I said, I do every morning. And I try to carry it with me throughout my life.
And it's obvious to me that you do carry it throughout your life.
I'm grateful,
Yes.
to be able to remain humble and grateful is the most important thing for me.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to close.
Thank you.
Pat, thank you for coming on
I'm
to
happy to
Glimpses.
be here. Thank you
It's a
so
real
much.
pleasure. As for those of you who are listening, as you go about your day, I encourage you to take the time, look around, and catch a glimpse. My friends, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Glimpses. Speaking of, Glimpses is now available for purchase at your online retailer of choice. And the best part? Every penny earned will be going to charities who support children in need. You can get your copy in the link below.